Alright guys, so we finally got in the mail most of the parts that we should need to get this jet ski running. I hope this will be enough anyway. So one of our most important pieces, if you guys watched the last video, is this crankshaft here. The original OEM one was absolutely toasted. The bearings were pretty rough. The new one was going to be about $350, and the cheapest I could find with shipping was going to put it closer to $500. So I ended up finding this used one on eBay for about 200 bucks. It's not perfect, but I think it'll be enough to get us running and hopefully last us for quite a while. I did get 3 new wrist pin bearings. We got a piston, a new head, because if you guys will remember from a previous video, the head from the cylinder that was all torn up was not going to be reusable. And then I did get the triple outlet fuel pump and full gasket kit. Also a new steering cable because the original one was broken. So I was able to pick this up also off of eBay for fairly cheap. I think it ended up being about 80 bucks.
I'm all out of money!
And then I did get a ball hone to try to repair that damaged cylinder. So I think we're about good to go, guys. So at this stage, really the main thing I'm going to be working on is this bottom end. So over here, if you guys will remember, we had quite a bit of scarring from the lower rod bearing giving out on that cylinder. So my hope is we're going to be able to clean that up and we're going to start slapping this engine back together and start getting everything assembled. So we're really getting into cleaning this thing. I sanded quite a bit of that. Keep in mind, guys, this is not how this should professionally be done by any means, but this is a budget build and we're just trying to get it running. So I did sand this off, got it nice and smooth so there's no flakes of aluminum. Then as I was getting here, I started seeing more and more chunks, so I ended up pulling off the oil pump here, which if you guys are doing that, you gotta be thorough with this type of stuff. If you're gonna reuse something like this, you're gonna need to get this completely clean. So I pulled the oil pump off because I was starting to notice quite a bit of metal chunks coming out of there. So pulled the oil pump gear out, and in this cavity here, there was a lot of sludge. I mean, you can see it there. There's a lot of metal chunks in there, which you got to get out. Otherwise, that's just going to go right back in to your freshly cleaned up bottom end. Probably take out your bearings. All right, both case halves are all cleaned up. I went ahead and used Bond as the gasket material for between the case halves. I'm sure there's some special kind that's specifically for Polaris, but Bond is what I've always used on all of my other motors. And it's pretty good stuff, and I know for a fact that Yamaha does a way better job designing stuff than Polaris, so I'm gonna go with that. Then I went ahead and took my bolts, got them all figured out what goes where. Then we're just gonna be going around, pulling each one out, putting blue Loctite on them, putting them back in there. We're not gonna tighten them, we're just gonna get them kind of ran down, and then we'll be following a specific bolt pattern for the final torque up. So now we've got our engine block completely assembled, and everything's Loctited and torqued down. Super important steps you want to do. You don't want to just go ahead and start impacting everything down. You definitely want to make sure everything is Loctited and torqued to spec. So we've made quite a bit more progress. Got the stator, the flywheel, the whole cover, that whole assembly attached. We got the gasket material in there and everything's torqued down. So now we got to go ahead and throw the pistons back on the rods before we can throw the jugs back on. So that's what we're going to be doing next. So obviously we did get 2 of the cylinders put on. Those went on super easy, just got some assembly lube, made sure the rings were all lined up and got those slapped in there. So with the bad jug, I did go ahead and end up honing it out. As you can see, it didn't get rid of all the markings, so we're just gonna see how this plays out, because right up here, you can probably see that on the camera, there's a pretty decent one there. It doesn't, my fingernail's not catching on it or anything. Other than that, I mean, you can see there's definitely marks around here, but it all feels fairly smooth. So I think it's just gonna be a matter of seeing what type of compression we get once we get this thing back together. I think the hone, did put really nice cross hatching, so I will give it that. I don't know if this camera's gonna pick it up or not, but it did put nice cross hatching in there. So happy with that at least. It didn't get rid of quite all the marks. I probably realistically needed to bore this thing or else get a new cylinder, which still may happen. If it doesn't build good compression, we're just gonna be going with a new/used cylinder that's in better condition. So that was it, guys. You can see everything rolls over nice and smooth. Definitely don't think any of the rings came off of their pins. Doesn't sound like we're snagging at all. So at this point, we'll just hope the thing builds compression. Now we've got everything bolted to the motor that's going to go on before we actually install the motor. I was trying to keep it as light as I could, but also had to install the exhaust manifold just so there's kind of somewhere to grab onto when you lower it into the hull. And then over on this side, went and put the intake manifold on, as well as the reeds and cages behind there. There was one set of reed pedals that looked a little rough, so we'll probably end up replacing those here before too long, but really just wanted to kind of get this thing into the Jetski and see if we can actually even get it to fire up. As you can see, there's still a lot of parts here laying on the floor, but really the most of this is just kind of bigger parts. I mean, you got the jet pump and the rest of the exhaust system there, and then of course the whole electrical system. And then there is also the carbs there too, which are going to need cleaned because there's quite a bit of aluminum dust on there from when I cut off that old exhaust pipe and was kind of over it and let things get way dirtier than I should have. So we're gonna go ahead and get some of this moved out of the way. I'm gonna go ahead and bring the cart back in here, and then we got a buddy to come over and help me put the hull back on the cart. And then we'll get the motor here set back into the ski and hopefully get this thing wrapped up today and see if we can maybe get it started. So the motor's all finished up. We got all of our oil lines and fuel lines pretty much remade up to get rid of all the old nasty stuff that was in this ski. So basically really what I got to get done now is lifting that up and getting it set in here. So let me go ahead and do it. It's kind of a pain doing this by yourself, but the way I got it out is to kind of stand up here, get on either side of it, pick it up, and then kind of set it across the hull and come up here, stand on the thing, and then lower it in. If you had an engine hoist, it'd be a lot easier, but this is kind of how I got to do it. So. There we go. Not fully in place, but it's a start. Try to get you guys some bit of an angle here, but I don't think I pinched any hoses at least, hopefully. So got to slide this thing forward another couple inches anyway to get it onto those motor mounts. Did have a couple of the motor mounts out on the other side because I knew it was going to be a pain as it is getting this thing in here. And it's really bad if you're trying to lift it up over the studs on either side. Okay. That is sitting on the motor mounts on this right-hand side. Now we got our other two motor mounts. We'll go ahead and get those put in on the left side here. Not going to tighten anything down yet. We do still have to get this motor lined up, but at least we'll have it fully sitting in its cradle, or whatever you want to call it. I think that's a pain about working on these things. It's hard to figure out which side you need to be on to actually get an angle on lifting things or getting to places because the edge of the hull really gets in your way. All right, just got the pump bolted in. Got everything all splined in here. So you do really need an alignment tool, which you basically have to get from a dealership to connect your rod that comes off your jet pump and connects into your PTO coming off of your engine. However, like I was saying, I don't have one, and there are no dealerships that work on PWCs around here, or at least the Polaris ones. So kind of just had to eyeball it and make it work. I didn't change anything from how when it was pulled out, so everything's still shimmed here how it already had been. And the drive shaft did slide in perfectly fine. It is kind of a little bit rounded on the end, so it gives you a little bit of wiggle room. But that is something that is super important to make sure that that is lined up. So if you guys care more than I do, I'd probably recommend finding a dealership or else buying the tool and doing it yourself. So the main things to keep in mind, guys, if you do not do a proper alignment, is you could possibly take out your crank bearings and your pump bearings. Things will just get in a bind and start heating up, and it's a very good possibility you'll end up taking those out. So just know that risk if you do choose to forego doing an alignment. So we are getting very, very close to having this thing wrapped up, at least to do a test fire. I don't know about wrapped up. That all depends on how all of the tests go when we actually do try to test fire it. So everything's wrapped up here in the front. Got the fuel tank all bolted down, oil tank, brand new fuel lines all the way through. And coming back here, we did not do new spark plug wires or anything. These seem to be fine. I did clean them up a little bit. They had quite a bit of grime on them, so got those all cleaned up. Carburetors are all attached. The main thing I wanted to show you guys, because I know I've mentioned it quite a few times, and I'm sure people are going to be pretty curious, is this triple outlet fuel pump that I hyped up so much. So hopefully this is going to be kind of a fix for a lot of the problems that these machines had. We've still got our fuel lines coming through here. It goes through our switch, goes into the filter, into the water separator, and then you can see it just goes straight into the pump. We got the pulse line there that goes, if it'll focus, the pulse line there that goes to the actual crankcase, and then we got just 3 lines that go to each individual carburetor. The other thing we did get rid of, you can see here, is this autocock device, which Polaris recommended to be removed. I don't even know when that bulletin came out, but it was quite a while ago. And so basically where there's this Y, that was where it was just a single feed. So you had an inlet here, right there, and then it also ran off of a pulse line to vacuum actuate it. And then you had the outlet here that ran to just the single feed to feed all the carbs. So that is trash. Those were very known for failure. So between that and getting rid of the single outlet fuel pump going to the triple outlet, that should fix a lot of our problems. The main thing now is I already got the battery in, I got the cover on it and everything. I don't really care for how Polaris did this, but the whole electrical box sits on top of it, gets strapped down, which is fine, I guess. It just seems like it could have been mounted a little better. I like those 2 Yamahas that we've got because they actually mount to, they're a little bit longer, I think, but they mount like kind of somewhere back in here. There's a wall, and then you got another compartment there in the back. But anyway, what I'm getting at is once we get all this mounted down, hopefully we don't have any more electrical issues. After that, it's just going to be hoping that we do actually have compression in the 2 cylinders where I did not replace pistons. And then, of course, hoping that the one where I did replace the piston and hone the cylinder, we just have to hope that that actually builds some compression as well. All in all, though, I am feeling very confident. Probably a little more confident than I should. It's probably just because I'm trying to talk myself out of being nervous that this all just goes completely south. So we're going to wrap up the rest of this electrical stuff, and we'll test this thing out, guys. All right, guys. Well, we have everything officially installed. It is going to take a bit to prime the system and everything, I'm sure, but we're going to go ahead and turn it over and kind of see how she does.
Many unbearable hours later.
So this thing is definitely not wanting to run on its own, so I got some gas and oil mixed up here. We're gonna go ahead and dump some into the carbs. Try to help this thing out a bit. This thing sounds insane compared to those 2-cylinder Yamahas. Like, holy crap, this sounds good. And now you can see this, it just took a while. That was all it needed. It just needed to prime up the fuel bowl there. So we're all full of fuel now. The one thing I am not seeing is it doesn't look like the oil pump has pulled anything down yet, which is not good, but that's why I put a premix in there. However, looking under the hood, if you want to call it that, you can see, so when I initially filled this, the tubing there on the right was full of oil, but once it got to that filter, it hadn't had any, and you can see it is starting to pull through there. So I think if we run this thing for a bit more, it should go ahead and pull that oil all the rest of the way out of there. For now though, I think I'm definitely going to go ahead and run the premix until I am certain that we're actually getting oil and fuel coming through there. So it's gonna be smoky running it for this first batch, but dude, just the fact that it ran is a huge win. Like, that is insane. I'm super happy about that.